You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Welcome everybody back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Athan Hristodulu, and today we are doing our final power rankings for the 2021 NFL season. Last night wrapped up what was an absolutely insane Week 18 of the NFL, where it felt like there was 3 playoff games going on within just the week, and it's not even Wild Card Weekend yet. The Raiders and Chargers duked it out to the very end in overtime. It was absolutely absurd what we were witnessing. Awesome week of action, a lot to get into. We're doing power rankings today, all 32 teams from worst to first. So make sure you hit that like button down below, help support the channel, hit the subscribe button for more content. We'll be doing this week a little bit differently since there's only going to be, 6 games for the wild card weekend? 6, 7, whatever the number is. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Whatever the number is. I will just be doing game previews for each and every one as we go through the week, as opposed to just like a giant NFL picks video. So last week was the last NFL picks of the year. We will just go through game by game, since it is such a small slate. So make sure you hit that sub button so you catch all of our game previews. Now, let's get into some NFL power rankings, shall we? So, the final power rankings of the season. The season is done. The Colts got eliminated in wild fashion against the Jaguars. The Dolphins were able to trounce the Patriots and knock them down in their seeding. The Bills got the win over the Jets to secure the AFC East. The Raiders beat the Chargers to knock the Chargers out of the playoffs and allow the Steelers to come on in while taking their spot in the number 5 seed. A lot has gone on in just the last 24 hours that regards playoff seeding. It has been awesome. We're going to start with the bottom group here, 32 through 26. I'll pull them up onto the screen for you now. And at the very bottom of my list, and this might even be controversial for some of you, I do have the New York Giants. And why do I have the New York Giants? Because they were abysmal this season. And listen, I am not going to lie to you guys. I had very high hopes for the team. I thought that their ceiling was somewhere around like 10, 11, maybe 12 wins if things went really, really well for them. They brought in a lot of skill talent. They had the receivers. The offensive line was kind of the big question here, but Saquon Barkley was back. You had Daniel Jones with weapons. The defense was pretty good last year, and it was pretty good this year as well. The offense, though, it looked like a third grader was drawing up some of the game plans that this team was going with, despite whether it was Daniel Jones under center or the backups we've had for the last few weeks. They did not look good at all this season, and they are my final 32 ranked team of the league. Now, at number 31, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars getting a big upsetting win over the Colts to knock them out of the playoffs. This was probably the best game Trevor Lawrence has had all year. He looked really good. He looked comfortable. The Jaguars really came to play and play the upset despite all the clowning stuff going on social media and at the game with fans wearing clown suits and whatnot. There was a whole thing going on over there, but aside from all that, the Jaguars are able to push all that drama aside, get a big win in front of their home field fans, and secure their spot at number 31. At number 30, we have the Detroit Lions, who also got a big win over the Packers, who were playing a game that did not really matter for them. Aaron Rodgers and company did start for a handful of the game, but ultimately they ended up pulling Rodgers out somewhere around the third quarter, and Jordan Love took the game into his own hands and threw an interception that cost basically ended the game in a I don't want to say ended the game, but ended any real hopes of winning. I'm a little bit worried about Jordan Love over there in Green Bay, and we'll talk about them in a minute, but I've got to say that this Detroit Lions team has been very resilient. They went 3-3 to wrap up the year, a very strong finish for a team that looked really bad throughout the majority of the season. They are no longer getting the number 1 pick because of the win that they just had this week. So shout out to the Detroit Lions for improving and getting themselves out of the worst position, best position in the draft, but the worst team position. I like this Lions team. I like Dan Campbell. I like the culture they're building over there. I look forward to seeing what they do next year, but I do have them sitting at 30. Next is the Jets at number 29. They ended up taking a big whopping loss to the the Buffalo Bills, other New York team, 27-10. This is another team that has a lot of work to do going into the offseason, bringing in some more skill talent, working on the defense. There's some questions over there as well as to who they bring back and who they end up letting go. But there's a lot of cap room, a lot of draft capital. I like Robert Saleh as the head coach over there. It feels like, the Jets might be trending in the right direction. Finally, they did get some big upset wins this year, but I do have them ranked at 29. At 28, we're looking at the Houston Texans, who nearly played spoiler for the Tennessee Titans this week in a very close 28-25 matchup. I do have to say this, Texans fans, with how much of a mess this season has been and just how crazy things can be for you guys with the whole Deshaun Watson situation, I have to say that I think, and it seems at this point it is a given that Deshaun Watson's going to be gone. You might have somebody in Davis Mills. I was pretty high on him coming into the draft. This was somebody that I was saying the Steelers should go after. Big-bodied dude, comes from a pro-style system. I was like, yeah, the Steelers should get him to replace Ben Roethlisberger after this year. Well, they didn't, and ultimately the Texans ended up getting him, and honestly, he's looked fairly good. Like, he's had some good stretches of games. He's had obviously he's had his growing pains. He wasn't a first-round pick by any means, but the guy came from a pro-style system, and he's looked pretty good for the Texans this year. So you guys might have a guy despite losing Watson this offseason. Next up at 27, we got the Carolina Panthers, a team that I've talked about all year with a championship-level defense and an offense that just absolutely sucks. The offensive line is not good. Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy. The quarterback position is a mess. Their wide receivers drop footballs left and right. This is a team that I did expect to have a little bit of a better season. I thought maybe they'd improve on last year's record, but they did not. They actually technically did worse because they had one more loss this year than last. I don't know if Matt Rule's the guy anymore. I feel like Joe Brady got scapegoated, and the offense honestly looked no better, if not worse, than when they got rid of him. So I think Matt Rule should be on the hot seat and maybe even on the way out as well. Obviously, you don't want to just go through a coaching change after 2 years, but I feel like they kind of scapegoated in the middle of the season with Brady, and I feel like Matt Rule should be his future should be up in the air just as much as Brady's was. Next up at 26, we are looking at the Washington football team. They're going to be announcing their team name on February, I believe, 2nd or 4th is what I saw, something like that. But it's coming up pretty soon, which is exciting, so we will know the future of them. However, this season was, I would say, pretty much a letdown for them. This is a team that I thought, with how stout their defense looked last year, great pass rush. They gave the Buccaneers trouble last year. They beat the Buccaneers this year. I had some high hopes for them. They added pieces to the defense. Ryan Fitzpatrick was supposed to obviously be the QB1, and that did not work out, and I'm very curious as to how this team would have fared if they had somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick who, despite being a journeyman, has been pretty solid in his career and opportunities, especially late in his career. I was really excited to see where this team could have gone, maybe even potentially win the NFC East, but ultimately the defense kind of fell flat on their face. They're good at stopping the run, not great at stopping the pass. They could not get pressure on the quarterback, and the offense was hit or miss depending on the week. They were, putting up 20, 30 points, or they were putting up barely anything. So no real consistency. Unfortunate events for Washington. I got them at 26. Next up, we're looking at the Chicago Bears, who sounds like they're going to be letting go of Matt Nagy. I'm recording this fairly early in the morning. There's a strong possibility that he's fired by the time that I release this video for you guys to see later today. But I do think that it is time for them to move on from Matt Nagy. Andy Dalton, time for him to head out as well. I would say that it's focused on Justin Fields, building a team around him. They got to work on that offensive line because, my God, was it awful this year. And, whether it was Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, any of those guys, running for their lives, to say the least. This is one of the worst pass blocking teams in the NFL. They do have some skill position players to work with, of course, and the defense is pretty good. It's just a matter of getting that offense to go with it. So let's see what Chicago does, but right now I like them at 25, right behind a team that they beat in the Seattle Seahawks, and the reason they're on the rise is because I do like the fact that they were able to get the win over the Cardinals while the game didn't. It did kind of mean a lot to them because winning the game potentially, I think if they had won, they were able to win their division. I'm not 100% sure because the Rams did lose. I don't know how that really worked out, but ultimately the Seahawks playing upset to the Arizona Cardinals. Whether that is the Cardinals just slipping up towards the end of the year or not, I really don't know. The Cardinals are such a hot team, and then they kind of slowed down. But the Seahawks, man, what a weird season this has been for them with all the drama throughout the entire year with Russell Wilson getting hurt and people questioning what the heck was going on and whether Pete Carroll needs to go or Russell Wilson needs to go or both. Like, whatever you think, I think they both need another year together. Could I see Russell Wilson leaving? Yes, absolutely. There is an out with the contract the way it works. If they trade him away, they could get away with saving a decent amount in cap space by splitting the cap over the dead cap money over the next couple of years. But ultimately, I think keeping Pete Carroll and having Russell Wilson on the team for at least one more year is in Seattle's best interest. It sounds like Seattle's going to meet with Pete Carroll as well to kind of see where his head's at and where the team's head's at. So interesting to see how that works out. But, the Seahawks, pretty solid end to the season despite the rocky year that they've had. They missed the playoffs. Hopefully they can kind of retool and just get right back into it next year. A perennial playoff contender for the last 10 odd years or so. A down year, one down year, and you can kind of see how crazy things got with Seattle. So I don't expect either of them to be gone. I fully expect that they should be together for one more year at least and see if they can right the wrongs of this past season. At 23, we got the Atlanta Falcons, a team that, all year was kind of like fringe playoff, and then the last few weeks just kind of fell right out of the playoff contention. I never really believed in them as a playoff contender. I think I had them labeled as the third best team in the NFC South, which I believe is what they ended up being as. I predicted a handful of the divisions correctly, and for some of you that yelled at me for some of those, I feel like I deserve a sorry for it because I was pretty spot on with a handful of divisions. I got some really wrong, but I got a lot of them fairly right. Ultimately, though, taking a look at the Falcons, Matt Ryan, I don't know what they're going to do about that final year of his contract. I think he's on the cap for like $40 million or something like that. I would think that the Falcons look to move on. While there aren't like the stars that you're looking at quarterback in the draft, depending on who ends up being available and whatnot, might be able to take this offense to the next level. I think Matt Ryan's still a solid quarterback. I just think it's time for a change of scenery if he's going to keep playing. I feel like him in Atlanta has kind of run its course. But I will say, give credit to the first-year head coach where it's due, being able to, I think they won almost twice as many games they did last year. So down year for the Falcons. We'll have to see where they end up going from here. They got to add some offensive weapons. They need to work on the offensive line a bit. The defense, not great either. They got a lot of talent they need to infuse into this team to become a real contender, especially in the NFC South and in NFC in general is fairly competitive. A lot to work on for this team. I don't expect a ton out of them next year either, but it depends on how their offseason goes. Next up is 22, the Denver Broncos, a team that a lot of people argue is just a quarterback away from being a playoff contender, and I think that is a fair argument to be made because there's a handful of games that you look at where if you think, okay, even if they had somebody like a Kirk Cousins or a like whatever you'd consider Matt Ryan, for instance, like a middle of the road, very solid starting quarterback, this team would have ended up doing a lot better this year. And I think that's a fair argument. Really good skill talent, pretty solid offensive line, a defense, not a championship defense. I would say a playoff ready defense. I don't know if it's a championship level defense, but a very good defense at that. They need to find a QB. If they find a QB, whether it's in the draft or if they're able to get somebody in free agency or make a trade for a guy, this is a team that can go from just missing the playoffs to being a full-blown playoff contender. They need to find a quarterback, though. It has not been a good time since losing Peyton Manning over there in Denver, so they got to figure something out. Next up is the Minnesota Vikings at 21. It sounds like there's a possibility Kirk Cousins might be gone. I don't really know if that's for the best of the Minnesota Vikings. He didn't have a terrible year. He played pretty solid, actually. I believe he's like in the top 5 for QB rating. I think he's number 4 or number 5. There's a lot more problems on defense than I would say anything else. They got to sort out their defense. When I was talking about teams going into this season with the Vikings, I said this team would go as far as the defense would allow them, and I think that rang fairly true throughout the entirety of the year. It was not the unit that a lot of people were expecting. They brought in a lot of talent, and I had Vikings fans screaming at me when I put the Packers over them in the number 1 spot for the NFC North, despite all of the signs pointing to Rodgers wanting out and whatnot and all that kind of craziness that was going on at that point. The Vikings defense is not good at all. I love the offense that they have going on there. JJ, they got, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. Kirk Cousins is solid. The offensive line was getting good. They got to build out a defense. They really do. If they can get a good defense going, this is a playoff team, but they don't do a lot well on the defensive side of the football, right? Without even getting into specifics. There's not a lot that they do well. They let up a ton of points, a ton of yards, whether it's through the air, through the ground, just not consistent enough to be a playoff team, hence why they're on the outside looking in. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns sitting at number 20, getting a win over the Bengals back up this week. They do not move in the boards here. They just sit right in their very spot. I'd have to say that the Cleveland Browns obviously having a very disappointing season. I'm curious to see how much that injury really hampered Baker Mayfield's play because it's insane how up and down his career has been. The Browns have committed to him with the 5th-year option, so it looks like he will be the starter for one more year, and I think that's for the best with Cleveland, keeping him there with the head coach in the system. I don't think starting over at quarterback is really going to help this team. They still have a lot of really good talent. They need to find some direction, though, on offense. It feels like the defense is pretty solid, but that offense, man, just some games it seems like there's so much talent over there, but they don't really know what's going on. Do I expect a bounce back from them or not next year? I guess that remains to be seen depending on the additions that they have going through the offseason. But the Cleveland Browns, man, what a disappointing year. They were in the playoff hunt till pretty late in the year, but ultimately I didn't really expect them to miss the playoffs. I'm surprised that they did and how bad the wheels fell off on this wagon, but I really think it boils down to just how poorly Baker Mayfield played and whether that injury or not was hampering his play. At number 19, we have the Dolphins getting a big win over the Patriots, as they usually do in Miami late in January. This is another team that, 7 straight wins, 7 straight losses in the same season. A very bizarre unit, to say the least. They were in the playoff race up until last week. I don't know what's going to happen with Tua. It sounds like Deshaun Watson's going to be heading over to Miami. I don't know what the status is on all of his legal issues, and I don't really want to get into all that. So I'll just leave it at this. Tua showed some signs of growth. I don't know if it's time to just move on from him. The defense is very good. Offense, they're like a couple, maybe another piece on the offensive line and a true running back, a number 1 running back away, maybe another wideout. But I like their receiving group, Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, and then obviously Jalen Waddle. There's a lot of talent over there. But, I think like a true number 1 back and then maybe another piece or two in the offensive line to really keep Tua protected, this could be a legitimate playoff team. Whether or not that happens, though, or if they just go all in on Deshaun Watson, I think that also elevates them and makes them a playoff team as well. Deshaun Watson, pretty good at playing, under duress. Would love to see how he fares over there in Miami. Should be interesting to see. I like the Dolphins' future. They're looking pretty good. Everyone was kind of, way off the wagon, myself included, when it came to like that first 8 games of the Dolphins season. But it seems like some people have kind of jumped back up on the bandwagon for Miami. And, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, this can be a really good team going forward now. You can argue their 7 straight wins, and the teams that they played and whether they were good or not and blah, 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 blah. They just beat the Patriots in Miami. That's a playoff team. That's a big win for them. A nice little win to send them off into the offseason. Be curious to see where they end up going into next year. Next up at number 18, we got the New Orleans Saints, who got the big win that they needed this week against the Falcons, but ultimately were still knocked out of playoff contention because the 49ers were able to take down the Rams. This was a team that I wish I knew what they could have been with Jameis Winston. They were 5-2 with him, and then obviously the rest of the season happens. They finish off 9-8. Not the year that I think they were hoping to have here, with so much talent on both the offense and defense, a really good defense and a ton of skill talent on the offense, really good offensive line as well. I don't know whether Jameis Winston's going to be in New Orleans or not come next year. I think they should definitely consider keeping him because, while you still got the Jameis Winston interception here and there that you would come to expect from him, his turnovers were turned way down, and he was really effective for the unit. Like I said, they were looking good. They were 5-2 before he went down. Who's to say that a few of those games that they lose because of really poor quarterback play, they ended up winning because of Jameis Winston being in the pocket? Who knows? I like their future. I want to see Jameis Winston stay there, but I could also see the Saints maybe being a little bit aggressive and trying to get one of these potential quarterbacks that'll be on the move. At number 17, the Colts taking a free fall. Last week, I think I had them at, 9 or 10? And I even said in last week's power ranking, I don't really know if I want them to be here because I felt like it was too high, and damn sure it was. They lost to the Jaguars in Jacksonville. Extremely disappointed with this year. As a Colts fan, I can be hypercritical, and I could go into a whole thing about, just how unhappy I am with the way this season went down and some of the decision-making with the quarterback situation and whatnot. I know that some Colts fans love Carson Wentz, others don't. At this point, I'm not really sold on Carson Wentz. I feel like there was no game where we could really put the game on his back and have him win. He did have some really good big plays in some really tight situations, but ultimately, I don't know if Carson Wentz is going to be the guy going forward. I think he's about an average quarterback in the NFL with above average play here and there, and then also below average play here and there, depending on the week and what's going on. We need to focus on this ground game that we have in Indianapolis and then just kind of go from there. Defense can also use some work. The fact that we let the Jaguars have their best game offensively this year against us is pretty much unacceptable, so we'll leave that as it is. At number 16, we got the Baltimore Ravens, who just missed the playoffs. Had they beaten the Steelers, they would have been in, but unfortunately, they could not get the win against Pittsburgh and now are sitting right on the outside looking in the playoffs. The whole Lamar Jackson being out for like the pretty much back half of the season, it felt like. I think he was out for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, something like that. It's been a while since we've seen Jackson play. really killed the Ravens' chances. I don't want to, discredit Huntley or anything like that. I think he's going to get a shot to start somewhere because there is some quarterback situations that could very much well be filled with his shoes. I'm curious to see where this team would have been had Lamar Jackson not gone taken down. And then also on top of that, just the amount of injuries that this Ravens team had, so much to overcome. And the fact that they were literally fighting for a playoff spot here in week number 18 just shows how resilient the group is. And of course, they come up short against what is starting to look like a pretty solid Pittsburgh team. I was just ragging on them a couple of weeks ago for their defense really starting to loosen up, but they held tight and ultimately took down the Ravens. Curious to see where this team goes next year, and to be a much healthier unit, I think will take this team much, much further. At 15 through 11, at number 15, right on the outside looking in, the Chargers, who lost to the Raiders last night in epic fashion to the Las Vegas Raiders in a divisional matchup, which was basically a playoff game, win and you're in type deal. Both teams could have tied and could have made the playoffs, and it got pretty close. It was a 32-32 scoreline in overtime, and apparently a lot of people bet on this game being a tie, and that's very interesting that was the case, because very unlikely of a tie. There was, one tie this year? I mean, ties don't happen too often in the NFL, and I understand, it's like a situation where you could both just tie and make to the playoffs. That's not the competitive nature of the NFL. The Chargers got to work on their defense. They have one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and it was for the majority of the year, and if it didn't end this season as 32, they're probably 31 or 30. I don't know off the top of my head, but they got to work on this defense. They have so much talent on the offensive side of the football, a stud at quarterback, a stud at running back, great wide receivers, an offensive line that's learning to grow. They need to learn how to stop the run because their passing defense was really good this year, but they just up front, they cannot stop the run. If they could figure that out, this is a playoff team. It was hard to really take them seriously this year with the fact that they were just letting teams run all over them. And when it comes to this late in the year football in January, and now we're going to be spilling into February at this point, you got to be able to stop the run. You got to. And that's the only way. At number 14, we got ourselves the Philadelphia Eagles. Made it into the playoffs. They got shellacked by the Cowboys, though. This is like they are the number 7 seed, in my opinion. You can't lose 51-26 to a division rival who's also in the playoffs. I don't know if their playoff hopes are very high going into this one here. I believe they are playing the Buccaneers week 1 in the wild card round. That is going to be an interesting matchup for sure. But, I mean, you can't get whacked by a division rival like this the week before the playoffs. That has got to be a momentum killer for the Eagles. They meet Tom Brady. Tom Brady gets a shot at knocking out the team that beat him in the Super Bowl a few years ago, so we'll have to see how that whole thing shakes out. Obviously, two very different teams, Tom Brady being on the Buccaneers now, and Jalen Hurts was not even the quarterback or on the team when that happened, but interesting game to say the least. Somewhat of a revenge game for Brady. I don't know how far the Eagles are going to go in this playoffs, to be realistic with you guys. I love the way that they play, but I don't know if their style of offense is going to lead to a victory over a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. At number 13, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are sitting in, I believe, the number 7 seed, if I'm not mistaken, for the AFC wildcard round. They have a tough matchup in the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs did whack them, but the Steelers did get a big victory this week. I like them at number 13. This is a team that I think has surprised a lot of people. I did not expect them to be in the playoffs, and hats off to them for finding their way in and getting it done when it mattered most. Watching that game go into overtime was some real exciting stuff. Seeing Ben Roethlisberger lead them down for the field goal was great as well. Do I think that the Steelers could beat the Chiefs if they catch the Chiefs on a bad day? But ultimately, I don't know if they have the offensive firepower to keep up with the Chiefs. The defense has not been quite the defense that they were last year, or for the majority of this year, very impressive at all. Aside from TJ Watt being very dominant, you have Hayward as well. But realistically, there's just a lot to question over there in Pittsburgh. Their secondary is not great. Offensive line has not been great as well. I just don't know if they can keep up with the Chiefs. At number 12, we got ourselves the Las Vegas Raiders, who slipped their way into the number 5 seed. Crazy how they weren't in a playoff spot, and then they found themselves in a 5 seed after getting a win last night. Great on them. Talk about just against all odds with adversity and making it happen and finding a way into the playoffs. Getting an interim head coach in Rich Bisaccia, and then on top of that, you lost Arnett, you lost Ruggs. There's so many losses throughout the entire season and so much drama surrounding this team. And to find your way into a playoff spot and to be the top wild card team technically too, not wild card team, excuse me, like the top non-divisional team as well, speaks volumes to just how talented this team is, and also just like how battle tested they are. This is a dark horse team that I think can go pretty far. It just depends on who they're playing and how, and what kind of day they catch them on, but definitely do not sleep on the Raiders. I'm very surprised with the comeback that they kind of made. I had them dropping pretty far down in the second column of teams here, and they were able to, scrape and claw their way back into number 12. I like the Raiders. I like what they're about, and I like how well they are able to go against adversity. This is a team that is battle-tested, and that's what you want when you're getting into the NFL playoffs. At number 11, we got the New England Patriots. Tough loss in Miami. I picked the Patriots to win, and I also picked the Colts to win this week. And honestly, the track record for both of those teams playing against those teams in the time frame it was they were going to lose. And I was even talking to people afterwards, like, yeah, I picked the Colts and the Patriots, but I think they're going to also lose. I don't understand what it is about northern teams struggling in Florida, but that is like a real thing, 100% a real thing. I don't know what it is. That's 100% a weird thing, because that dates back to when Tom Brady was still in New England, and the Colts have not beaten the Jaguars in Jacksonville since 2014. Like, whatever that anomaly is, that is a legit thing. I don't know if it's the humidity and all that stuff. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It is some bizarre craziness that goes on in the NFL. Just one of those weird stats. Do I think that do I think that the Patriots have what it takes to take down the Bills there in the wild card round? The last time these two teams played, it wasn't very close. That first time that they played, extreme weather conditions, very unique game. I know that Bill Belichick, if there's anyone who can right wrongs of a loss, it's going to be him. I believe in Bill Belichick. Do I think the Patriots can get it done? Maybe. I don't know. But at number 11, I like them there. They are a playoff team, and I think they are one of the better teams in the league. I've been preaching that all year long. Just great coaching, great defense, a really good offense with a quarterback that's just very young and inexperienced, who has played, about average to above average, depending on the week. I like the Patriots. I like the team as a whole. Do I think they can go far in the playoffs? Depends on who they're playing and how well their defense holds up, in my opinion, because the defense is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting here. At number 10, we got ourselves the San Francisco 49ers, who played themselves into a playoff spot, taking down division rival LA Rams. Really big win for the 49ers. This ground game is incredible. The defense is coming on strong. I don't know if I believe in the quarterback, though, over there in San Francisco. Listen, you could say what you want about the stat line at the end of that game. People were like, Jimmy G willed them back to tie up the game. The Rams are playing very bad prevent defense, 1, and 2, up until that final drive, I think Jimmy Garoppolo had like 220 some odd yards and 2 interceptions. He was throwing that game away. He can't play like that again in the playoffs. Period. End of story. He cannot play like that again if the 49ers want to actually make a serious Super Bowl run. That was not a good game for Jimmy G. The ground game carried that team on their back. And obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo came through when it mattered most. Give credit where it's due. But that was a very suspect win. The 49ers are in the playoffs now. Can they go far? If they run the ball. At number 9, we got the Buffalo Bills, a team that themselves has kind of established a running game, but is still kind of working on that, and I think is the final piece for this team to be a complete team. It's still very Josh Allen-led, through-the-air passing attack type of team built to beat the Chiefs. The defense has looked pretty good all year long, depending on the week, sometimes a little bit less than others, but pretty good overall. I like them at number 9. I think that they're a strong candidate to make the AFC Championship again. I think that they have all the makings of an AFC Championship type team. There is definitely a team or two they could run into, though, potentially to knock them out of that contention, but I could definitely see them making their way into that. At number 8, we got the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know what the hell has been going on with them the last few weeks. Wins, losses. It's been really ugly for them. A tough ending to the year. J.J. Watt is potentially going to be back for the playoff push here. They took him off the IR, making a comeback much earlier than anticipated, doing his best to make sure he could make a run with this Cardinals team. Which will be a big difference maker. He might not be quite the player he was, but the intensity that he brings, the energy that he brings, I think could help elevate this defense. I'm excited to see what they do in the playoffs. but I'm definitely not as high on them as I was going, into the last like 4 or 5 weeks of the season. They've definitely slipped up, lost to some bad teams. So we'll have to see how they fare going into their first matchup this week. But, the Cardinals are kind of on a suspect watch right now. I like them, but I don't know if I can buy them as a Super Bowl contender. At number 7, we got the Cowboys, who handedly whooped the Eagles in a pretty wild rout, 51-26. I mean, I didn't even watch the entire game. I went to bed before the game was over, but it was done and done when I went to bed. And when I looked at the final score that next morning, I was like, my goodness. And I watched the highlights. Like it was just all Cowboys for that second half. That was complete rout. Unbelievable play by them. Their offense looked really good. The defense looked solid. I am a little bit concerned about the defense and just how much they can allow through the air. That's going to be something we're going to have to watch as we go into the playoffs. But as the number 7 team in the league, I definitely think that's a good spot for Dallas here. The offense has been, very good for the majority of the year. The number 1 team offense in yards per game. So, they're able to move the football. I think it's like they're averaging like 407 yards a game or something ridiculous like that. I do like the Cowboys. I think they'll go far. They could definitely be an NFC Championship type team. We'll have to see how they fare, and if they, I don't want to say something like this, but it is a thing of the most recent history of the Cowboys, choke a win or something or choke a loss, something like that. I like the Cowboys. I think they can go far. I really do. At number 6, Kansas City Chiefs. I have them at number 6 because I like a couple of teams ahead of them. Realistically, though, this is definitely one of the best teams in the AFC, and they could definitely be one of the best teams in the NFL when everything is going well. The defense, though, after having a really good stretch of games, has kind of slipped up the last few weeks. They were in a tight one against the Denver Broncos. Offense was sputtering a bit against a really good defense in the Denver Broncos, so we'll have to see how they fare when they start playing much stiffer competition going through the playoffs here. Should be an interesting matchup with them. They're going up against the Steelers in the first week of the playoffs there. I think the Chiefs have a really good shot at winning that game. They handled the Steelers really well the first time they played them. We'll have to see how the Steelers fare and how they adjust going into that matchup there. But the Chiefs are definitely a team that I think a lot of people are looking at as a true AFC contender for the NFL, or not the NFL. Oh my goodness, falling all over my words here. A true AFC contender for the Super Bowl. I definitely could see them making the AFC Championship for sure. Really good team, really good unit, great quarterback. Defense, when playing well, is really good. I like their chances. 5 through 1 to finish things off and wrap up the final power rankings of the year. At number 5, I got the Cincinnati Bengals. They didn't really play their they did not play their starters, not really, but they did not play their starters a lot. Jamar Chase played a little bit. Joe Burrow sat the entire game. Joe Mixon did not play either. There was like a few here and there that made a couple of plays, but ultimately, Bengals played their backups against the Browns. They ended up taking the loss. I'm not really going to discredit them for that, or not discredit them. I'm not going to knock them down or anything like that from that. I like the Bengals. I think that they have a really good shot at making the Super Bowl this year. Defense, the pass defense is a concern, especially in the middle of that defense there, but good at stopping the run. They have a great quarterback in Joe Burrow with a connection with a wide receiver who literally probably deserves Offensive Rookie of the Year, but may or may not win it depending on how much you love Mac Jones or not and whoever's voting and how they prioritize wide receivers over quarterbacks. But I will say that Jamar Chase has had a fantastic year. Joe Burrow, fantastic year bouncing back from his injury. Joe Mixon, a fantastic running back. The offensive line playing much better than I think a lot of people expected, myself included, and that defense as well. This is a team to look out for going through the playoffs here. At number 4, we got the LA Rams taking a loss to the 49ers. I knocked them down a couple of spots. I had them at number 2 last week. Disappointed in the loss, but ultimately that defense, just on that final drive that San Francisco scored, they played way too soft. Like, I understand it's prevent defense. You're trying to, hold them off. And Jalen Ramsey was realistically a few inches from tipping that pass that went for like a solid 30-some-odd yard gain or whatever it was. They were really close to making a stop there, but at the same time, you can't, like, that can't happen. That's going to lose you a playoff game. That was essentially in a vacuum kind of a playoff game for them, because if they get that, they're holding the number 2 seed. Now they are not holding the number 2 seed. That knocks them down to, I believe, the number 4 seed, if I'm not mistaken, because the Dallas Cowboys, I think, have a better record than them. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think that is the case. You can't lose a game like that. You really can't. Matthew Stafford made a great play to take the lead. The defense, all they had to do was hold on, and they just backed it way too far back. So, prevent defense is fine when it's necessary. Just play it a little bit tighter. At number 3, we got the Tennessee Titans. I don't have them at number 2 only because that game against the Texans made me worry a little bit. The Texans had literally nothing to play for in that game, but they played them and they played them well, and it was a close one, 28-25. I still love the Tennessee Titans and what they're doing. I think that they are a fantastic team, very battle-tested. They've dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of people in and out of games because of COVID and whatever the reason may be. They have dealt with a lot. Mike Vrabel is an excellent head coach for this team. He has made them a contender and a good one at that, holding the number 1 seed in the AFC. Definitely a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion, especially with Derrick Henry coming back. If this dude's playing their divisional game in a couple of weeks, good luck to whoever ends up running into the Titans. At number 2, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers firing on all cylinders despite the loss of Antonio Brown, despite Chris Godwin being out as well with an injury. They have taken some shots at wide receiver and lost him, but this is going to be a very interesting scenario because Tom Brady is doing Tom Brady things, and I could see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right back in the Super Bowl just like they were last year. They made it in as the number 7 seed, and this year they are the number 2 seed, where their only away game would be against Lambeau in the NFC Championship. Good luck to everyone going to Tampa Bay to play them. If you are a northern team in the NFC, which if I'm looking at everything, it doesn't seem like there's any northern teams, because we got Buccaneers, we got the Eagles are playing the Bucks. Good luck to the Eagles. I feel like the northern teams just can't play anyone that plays in Florida. I don't know what it is. I feel like that's probably going to ring true for the Buccaneers here as well. But the Bucks, they're getting a lot of players back at the right time. Aside from missing Chris Godwin and losing Antonio Brown last week, there's not a ton not to like about this defense or this offense or anything that they're doing over there in Tampa Bay. They're the number 2 team in the NFL, or in the NFC, for a reason. And number 2 in the NFL based off my power rankings. But good luck to anyone playing in Tampa Bay. And at number 1, the Green Bay Packers struggled with the Lions. I almost wanted to slip them down a spot, but I believe in the Packers. I feel like they might have gone into the game with a little bit of a vanilla game plan. It didn't really matter how it played. I think they were more playing to just prevent rust. And whether you believe in that sort of thing or not, I'm somebody that's a Colts fan who watched the Colts go 14-0 and then lose their last 2 games and then not win the Super Bowl that year. And while they weren't rusty, they were not as dominant as they were during that 14-0 run going into the playoffs. I think that is definitely something that, you can lose your edge. I don't want to say you get rusty, but you can definitely lose your edge when you miss too much time. And while the bye week is a competitive advantage because it gives people a week to rest, I think giving yourself too much rest prior to that bye can be bad. And so I like what the Packers did. They played until the third quarter. Game didn't really matter. They still pulled their starters anyways. And ultimately, they are my number 1 team in the NFL. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Week 18 is done. Super Wildcard Weekend starts next week. I'll have game previews for you guys rolling through the entire week for each and every Super Wildcard Weekend game. We got Saturday, we got Sunday, and we also got a Monday night game for the very first time, so it should be some interesting stuff to watch. Thank you all for listening or watching for wherever you are. It's been an awesome season, and I can't wait to roll through the offseason with you guys and this postseason here. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Enjoy the rest of your Monday, and have a great start to your week.